Welcome back to Weekday Grand Prix. If this is your first time here, I'm glad you found us. And if you've been following along, you already know we're deep into our Honda CBR600 restoration project. Today, we're making some real progress, swapping out the subframe, doing a bit of plastic welding, and getting this bike back together one piece at a time. Now, while I've got your attention, I want to talk a little bit about what this channel really is, and why I'm even doing it. Cue the intro. I'm 41 years old, and I want to be a YouTuber. Yeah, I know it's not the usual path. Most people my age are winding down hobbies and not trying to turn them into a career. But here I am. The truth is, it makes perfect sense to me and to try and do this now. For the past 13 years, I've been building a business with my wife, a company called Search and Rescue Denim. We make custom aprons for professionals, bartenders, chefs, hairstylists, tattoo artists. It's honest work. We built something lasting and something we're proud of. But if I'm being totally honest, aprons aren't my first love. Motorsport is. And eventually I realized I already have all the tools to tell the stories that I want to tell. So about a month ago, I found a little garage space. I picked up a previously crashed CBR600 and started filming. Now, before we get too deep into my life story here, let's get this subframe off and see what I'm working with. So if you were here for my last video, you saw we tried to repair the original subframe by heating it up and twisting it back with a pry bar. And this did a pretty good job, and I'd be fine with riding it, but it wouldn't feel right passing this bike along to someone else knowing that the subframe could be a weak point. So this week, I found a guy parting out another CBR600, and I picked up an undamaged subframe, as well as the shifter side rear set that needed replacing as well. So what is Weekday Grand Prix? It's a bit of a personal experiment, a creative outlet, and a long shot goal to build something new. But more than anything, it's a space to connect with people who love the stuff as much as I do. Not just bikes and cars, but the process. The desire to keep learning and improving, making mistakes, and the figure it out as I go mentality. That's what I'm here for. This isn't a pro garage. I'm not a certified mechanic. I'm just a guy who loves this stuff, and I want to get better at it. All right, now that we got the old subframe off, it's time to install the new one. I'll be honest, it did take a couple of tries to get everything back in the right order. And after a bit of trial and error, I got the frame, the wiring harness, the battery tray, and the exhaust and heat shield back where they were supposed to be. Now, speaking of the battery tray, it was in pretty rough shape when I got it. So let's rewind for a second and take a look at the plastic welding we did to get it back into shape. It looks like someone had previously used some epoxy to try and repair it, but it was really fragile and wasn't going to do the job that I wanted it to. This was my first time doing any plastic welding, but it seemed pretty straightforward. Essentially, it's a soldering iron that you can put metal staples into. You run a current through the staples so it gets hot, and then you can sink them into the plastic and bond your pieces together. It's not a particularly fast process, but with a bit of patience, it did produce a fairly sturdy result. All right, so now let's get on with swapping these levers out. This one's actually fine. It's our brake side that is pretty mangled, but let's start with the easy cable one first. First thing I'm gonna do is loosen off the clamp on our lever so we can get a little bit better access to the bolt underneath. And you wanna make sure you take sleeve out of here because it'll probably need to get transferred to our new lever. There she goes. Okay, so after much messing around, pounding on this thing, I finally got the original spacer out of the lever, and this will go in our new one. All right, so a little hiccup in the plans. The levers that we got that were definitely for an F4i, I was told would fit a 06 CBR600. They definitely do not. The pivot points on the old ones are quite a bit wider. So fortunately, the fellow I got these from is taking them back, and we will order a new set that definitely fits this model here. So for the time being, I've actually bent back the original clutch lever. I wouldn't want to go riding with it, but it'll be at least good for moving the bike around the shop. I know I'll make some mistakes. I am learning as I go here, but that's the point. We're going to figure this stuff out together, and maybe you won't make the same mistakes that I do. The name Weekday Grand Prix is a bit tongue-in-cheek. We're not pro racers with teams and sponsors showing up to the track on Sundays. We're the ones carving corners on back roads after work, wrenching in the garage when everyone else is watching Netflix, although, to be fair, I do still watch Drive to Survive, even though it has become a terrible reality show. It's not about being the fastest, it's about showing up, turning wrenches, and pushing myself. You don't need the latest superbike or a $500,000 sports car, just enough tools to get into trouble and the will to figure it out. I'm going to document this whole journey from garage builds, track days, road trips, meetups, and maybe even a race or two this season. And down the road, I'd love to sit down with supercar owners, team managers, independent racers, and ask them, how did you get here? What's your story? Because if there's one thing I know from building my own business, there's a lot of different ways to get to where you want to go. And the journey is usually more interesting than the destination. So if this sounds like the kind of thing you're into, stick around, and let's see where this goes.